All right, good morning, guys. For our lesson today, we're going to skip ahead a little bit. So, we did the American Revolution. You guys just took your quiz on that last week, and we're going to skip ahead a little bit because, again, this is a shortened because we are in the quarter system, so we have a shortened amount of time. So, hopefully, you remember what happened with the Civil War and the post-Civil War. I don't know if you don't, maybe go through your book or something, but we do need to skip forward a little bit. Otherwise, we just won't get through the things we need to get through. We're going to start talking about a different part of American history. We're skipping forward quite a bit, actually, to the end of the 1800s. And we're going to start talking about American imperialism, when America started going out and taking over other countries. And I like to talk about this part of history because I don't feel that we talk about it too much because we want America to look good, right? So that being said, let's get started with our lesson. The first thing I'm going to want you to do today is I want you to, not that part yet, is to do vocab. So there should be some vocabulary on your Google Classroom today. Go ahead, play the game on it. There we go. I need to create 2 words. I don't have my words up here. Okay. Anyway, so you're going to be doing your Quizlet. I just realized I don't have it loaded, but here it is. It should look like this. Go ahead, play the games, right? Probably I would do the match game. Go ahead, try that one. That's the same one we did last time. So you just take the word and you match it to its definition. So like yellow journalism, it'll go away. There you go. Once you've played that a couple times and you have learned all the definitions, you did your flashcards, whatever, however you learned them, go ahead, turn in that assignment. Just hit the turn in button. After that, you're going to go ahead and do this guided notes worksheet. And you'll need this video to do that. So I'm going to have a lecture for you in just right after this, and you'll use this document to take notes on that lecture. And then after that, the third thing you'll do today, there's a video. You'll click right here. That'll give you the link for the video. Go ahead, watch that video, and answer the questions. When you're done with that, you'll take a quiz. So I guess there's actually 4 things to do today. There is the vocabulary. There's the lecture, there's a short video, and there's the quiz. So that's what we'll be doing today. All right, let's go ahead and get started then. Hopefully you did the Quizlet, you're good. Let's go ahead and move on. All right, so go ahead, open up your imperialism guided notes, and we'll get started on our lecture for today. Hopefully I can get a glass of water or a drink of water real quick. Here we go. There we go. All right. So, US imperialism. Let's kind of start this area. Again, imperialism is a policy of increasing a country's influence, often by obtaining colonies, using military force, or by exerting economic pressure. It's when you try and take over another country. That's imperialism. When you try and say, America, I want America to be bigger, so we're going to take over Mexico. We're going to make Mexico do whatever we want them to. I'm not saying that we're doing that right now. I'm just saying that would be imperialism. Now, America has done this in the past, but I kind of want to talk a little bit about the history of imperialism first. So, when we think of imperialism, we should usually be thinking about the Europeans. The Europeans were great at imperialism. In 1884 and 1885, at the Berlin Conference, the Europeans decided, hey, Africa, no one's really in charge down there. Let's go down there and pick it up. Let's go ahead and take it over. And they did. And you can see all the different countries of Europe that took over these places in Africa. They took their resources. They weren't very nice to the Africans. And that is colonialization, right? Just a country taking over another country. The Europeans also did it in Southeast Asia. So if you look right here, you see the globe. I'm going to try and show you where we're talking about. It's that little area right there. Make it bigger for you. So this is the area I'm talking about right now, Southeast Asia, French Indochina, that's modern-day Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia. Those are the countries that we're talking about. And we kind of forget that the Europeans went down there and they took over those countries too. And you can kind of see all the European countries that took over. For example, the Spanish took over the Philippines, which is going to be important. We're going to talk about the Spanish taking over the Philippines in a little bit. All right, so the Europeans took over Africa. They took over Southeast Asia. The British were particularly good at that. The British would go over all over the place. The British went to Australia and they took over Australia. They showed up in Australia, and the Australians were like, hey, don't take our land. And the British were like, oh, do you have a flag? And the Australians were like, no. And the British were like, oh, I'm so sorry. I guess it's ours now because we have a flag, And that's kind of what the British did all over the globe. They'd put their flag down and say, this place is ours. And obviously it made the Australians, the Aborigines, very angry. But that's what they did. And obviously I'm oversimplifying it. The British used their guns and they shot people who, weren't cool with the British taking over, and that's how they took over. But again, they would just go and put their flags places. The British went to India, right? Same deal. They put their flag there. And they're like, you got a flag? No? Well, you should have had a flag, right? The British go to Canada. They take over Canada. Again, same thing. The British come, they put their flag down. They're like, it's ours now. They go to the Middle East. The British go to the Middle East. They put their flag down and they're like, it's ours. That's imperialism. And the Europeans, especially the British, were really, really good at imperialism, taking over these other countries. And the thing is, what happened is that the point is the Americans kind of looked around the world and they looked at what the Europeans were doing. And the Americans were like, how do I get in on some of that goodness? How do I get some countries to take over? I want some brown people to take over too. And that's what we're going to start talking about today, when the Americans started to take over other countries. All right, so let's talk about American imperialism. Not the Europeans, don't worry about the British anymore, but the Americans. Now, your book doesn't say this, but this is what I'm saying. I'm saying, America, we started imperialism almost as soon as we became a country. If you think about it, manifest destiny. Hopefully you remember that term. That's the idea that America, we started with the 13 colonies over here on the east, and we're going to go all the way across America and go all the way to the west. And we thought it was our destiny to do that. I think that's imperialism. That's us taking land from other people. Other people live there, right? That's the Native Americans. They live there, and we took their land. We got this whole area in 1783, the Treaty of Paris. Remember, the Treaty of Paris is what ended the Revolutionary War. We got all this land from Great Britain. We bought this whole area from Louisiana. From France. We called it the Louisiana Purchase. We kind of took Texas from Mexico, and we kind of took California, this whole area from Mexico too, during the Mexican-American War in 1848. So both Texas and California were both kind of taken from Mexico. To me, that's imperialism. But again, most historians don't really call that imperialism because we're like, oh, that was connected to us, or I don't know, whatever. But I would say that's the first American imperialism. But we didn't stop there. In 1854, we went over to Japan and said, Japan, you need to trade with us. And if you don't, we're going to blow you up. We brought our big old military in Japan and we forced them to trade with us. Forcing another country to do what you want them to. That sounds like imperialism to me. So I would say even that was imperialism. And that was, again, 1854. That was this guy. His name is Matthew Perry. He went over to Japan and made them trade. However, most historians, and the way your book kind of tells it, is the Americans didn't really start to imperialize until the 1890s. And it really started when we started to take over land that wasn't directly connected to us, right? Other countries just started to take them over. We started to do that because of something that happened with Spain. So I'm going to tell you the story of American imperialism, how we really started, and it really starts with Spain. So here's the story. Spain had taken over Cuba. Now, here's Cuba down here. I know you can't see behind my face, but here's Cuba down here, right next to Florida, right? Spain, which is way across, I know you can't see, but no, other way, that way. They're way across the ocean, way over there. And they came over, they took over Cuba. And we weren't super happy about this as Americans. We thought this was bad. We thought they were not treating the Cubans fairly. We thought, hey, that's messed up. One country should not go and control another country. We were going to be the good guys. We wanted to go into Cuba and help save the Cubans. So that's more or less what's going on. And what happens is the Cubans are not being treated well by the Spanish. So they have a revolt. the Cubans start revolting against the Spanish in Cuba. And we send our big military ship down there called the USS Maine. Now, we only sent our ship down there to protect Americans. There were Americans who hung out in Cuba, who lived in Cuba. So we sent the ship down there just to protect the Americans. However, something happened with this big ship. The USS Maine, all of a sudden, on February 15th, 1898, the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor in Cuba and sank to the bottom of the ocean. Now, this was kind of a big deal because all that we had heard about it was that this was the work of the Spanish. The Spanish sank our ship. Those damn Spaniards. Not only are they abusing the Cubans, now we send our ship down there, just, mind your own business, just protecting Americans, and the Spanish blow up our ship. This is what was reported. This was the rumor, the conspiracy theory, if you will, about what had happened with this boat, the USS Maine. So there's the boat. You can see it right up there, right? And the USS Maine is sitting in Havana Harbor. That's the USS Maine right up there. If you don't believe me, boom, there. Now it's the USS Maine. And it's sitting there in Havana Harbor. And the conspiracy theory was that at night, in the middle of the night, in pitch black darkness, the Spanish sent out a scuba diver. Now keep in mind, this is 1898. They don't have like scuba tanks like they do today. This is what the diver suits looked like. And the diver suits, they'd have to go to the bottom of the ocean. They could only walk on the bottom. They couldn't like swim in those things. These things were super heavy. So here was the theory. There was a guy, a Spanish guy, in an old-fashioned diver suit at the bottom of the ocean at night when it was totally completely dark. Oh, by the way, this guy had a bomb. Yeah, a big old mine, like huge mine. And by the way, this mine would have been bigger than the dude himself. And this dude walks under the ocean in the middle of the night underneath the USS Maine. And then when he's under there, he looks up and he looks at the Maine. And by the way, he wouldn't be able to see the Maine because it's pitch black underneath the ocean at night with no lights. You can't see anything. But this was a theory that he looked up. He had the bomb. He looks up. He finds the USS Maine and he throws the bomb up towards the USS Maine where it explodes and blows up the USS Maine. That was the conspiracy theory. And everyone in America got so mad. We're so upset at the Spanish. How dare they? They blew up our ship. We need to go to war with them. Now, and again, that's a theory. This is the picture that they saw the next day, February 15th, 1898. That's all that was left of the USS Maine. As you can see, it was totally demolished, absolutely destroyed. This is what the newspapers said. And then the next day, destruction of the warship Maine was the work of an enemy. And specifically, they're saying that it was the work of some sort of the Spanish, some sort of Spanish naval people. Now, that's not true. Almost certainly that didn't happen. Just common sense tells you that a person is not going to walk underneath a boat in the middle of the night with a huge, huge mine that's bigger than themselves, throw it up in pitch black without getting lost. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And we found out in 1976, there was a team of American naval investigators, and they determined that, yeah, the Maine, it just blew up because there was a fire in the ammunition barracks, so the ammunition stocks, and that blew up the ship. It was just an accident. But again, because of the newspapers putting this out, we got really upset. The president said that, hey, we need to have authority to go to war if we need to with Spain. And as soon as he said that, as soon as Congress gave him the authority, Spain actually declared war on us, and we had the Spanish-American War. Now, what had happened back then was called yellow journalism. You need to know this term. You need to know what yellow journalism was. Yellow journalism was news reporting that exaggerated or makes up news stories, and they, just to sell more papers, right? To sell the news, make people more interested, get people riled up, so they'll buy the news. And that's what happened. These newspapers, they were pretty sure that the Spanish didn't actually blow up the USS Maine. They were just doing fake news. Now, this is going to be one of the questions in your guided notes, because I love to talk about things that happened in the past and compare them to today. So I did put a tweet from our president. He said, "So much fake news. Never been more voluminous. Volume? It means that there's a lot of them, like it has a lot of volume. There's a lot of fake news or more inaccurate. But through it all, our country is doing great." Our president says this all the time. He says, hey, do you hear all these bad stories about me? And if you don't know, there's tons of bad stories in the news about Donald Trump, about him doing this or that, and all sorts of bad stuff. And he says, oh, it's fake news, that it's yellow journalism. He doesn't actually call it that, but that's what he's saying. So in your guided notes, I want you to tell me, do you think he's right? Is our news today, the media we have today, our news today, just as bad as it was back then, where they used to have fake news stories? Or do you think that Donald Trump is using that as an excuse? Do you think he's saying, hey, look at the past. Our news stories used to be bad, so they're still bad. Again, I want you to make up your mind on that. Do you think that Donald Trump is saying the truth, that most of our news is fake? Or do you think that our news is actually way better than it used to be because, people have the internet, they can double check things, we have more cameras, makes things easier to see? Or again, do you think our news is still pretty fake? And again, there's not a right or wrong answer to that, but please put a thoughtful response. All right, so all that stuff happened, the USS Maine sank, even though it wasn't some dude throwing a bomb. But because of that, because the USS Maine sank, we go to war with Spain. Like I said, we asked our president, William McKinley, he asked for permission to go to war. Congress says, okay, you can have that. And before we even announce war, Spain announces or declares war on us. And it wasn't good for Spain because we kicked Spain's ass in this war. Now, Spain had these 4 territories, and we're going to kind of take these territories from them. Spain had Cuba, which we already talked about. And we don't really take over Cuba, because remember how we said that we thought it was bad that Spain took Cuba? So we're not going to take Cuba. We kind of free Cuba. We let them have their independence, more or less. But we do take over 3 other places. We take over Puerto Rico, we take over Guam, and we take over a country called the Philippines, which was on that map before. Remember I showed you that the Spanish took over the Philippines on that map at the beginning of the lecture? Well, now we know who took it from the Spanish. We did. We took the Philippines. All right, let's move on from there. Again, please make sure you know those 3 places that we took over. Took over the Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. So make sure you know that. All right, next up. All right, so we do take over the Philippines. We actually technically buy it from Spain. And we actually make the Philippines our colony until 1946. And if you think about it, that kind of makes us hypocrites, right? We were saying, oh, Spain, you're so bad for taking Cuba as a colony. Bad on you. We're going to free Cuba, and we did. But then we take the Philippines as our colony. So did we really mean it? Did we really mean that we thought the Spanish were bad, or did we just mean that, hey, we want that colony instead? And I think it was more that. We were super racist to the Filipinos. We were saying that they're not smart enough to run their own country, and that's why we had to take over. It was a really ugly time period. But anyway, Philippines, they do get their independence, but we never give independence to Puerto Rico. And that's why Puerto Rican people are American citizens today, because technically Puerto Rico is a protectorate of the United States. They're kind of part of the United States. We took them over. They're not really their own country. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So if you ever wondered why Puerto Rico is technically a part of the United States, even though they're not one of our 50 states, this is why. They're our colony. We just never gave them up. Now, I did put in another quote from Donald Trump. This is something that he said about Puerto Rico. This was in 2019. So this is, August 28, 2019, just about a year ago. Puerto Rico is one of the most corrupt places on earth. Their political system is broken, and their politicians are either incompetent or corrupt. Congress approved billions of dollars last time, more than any place else has ever gotten, and it is sent to crooked politicians, no good. What Donald Trump is complaining about is a hurricane. There's a hurricane that destroyed a lot of things in Puerto Rico, and us as Americans, Congress, we approved billions of dollars to give to Puerto Rico to help them rebuild. And more or less, Donald Trump is saying, we shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't give money to Puerto Rico to help rebuild stuff. We already gave them lots of money. We don't need to do anything else. So this is another question I want you to answer in your guided notes. Do you think that America should have to pay for Puerto Rico's stuff? If something goes wrong in Puerto Rico, should we have to pay for it? If they have a hurricane, do we have to pay for it? If they have corrupt politicians and they waste their money, should we have to pay for that? Some people say, yes, look, we made them our colony, so we need to take responsibility for that. Others would say, hey, that was a long time ago. Maybe we need to let Puerto Rico go on its own now. So again, not a right or wrong answer. I want you to think hard about it, be reflective, and give me your honest opinion. What do you think? Should we have to take care of Puerto Rico still because we made them our colony? Or should we be like, you know what, Puerto Rico, you're kind of on your own opinion. All right. So that's kind of what happened with Puerto Rico. Guam is still, I know we didn't talk much about it, but Guam was one of the other places we took from Spain. That's still a protectorate colony of the United States. We still use it for our military bases. The Philippines we gave back, and Cuba we kind of let have their independence. So that's what happened with those ones. But there is one more place that I want to talk about that America kind of took over. I'm going to put this on pause for just a second because I need to get a drink of water. Give me 1 second. All right, let's continue. I know there's a lot of me talking today, so if you just need to put the video on pause for a bit, take a break, that's always okay. We're almost done. All right, there is one more place, though, like I said, I want to talk about that the U.S. took over, and it's one of the ones that we don't talk about very much. Technically, it is in your book, but they put like a paragraph in there. And I think the reason is because it makes us look bad. It makes America look bad to tell this story. So I'm going to tell it. So, Hawaii. What a lot of people don't realize about the state of Hawaii is that Hawaii used to be its own country. In fact, it used to be its own kingdom. It wasn't even that long ago. In the 1800s, Hawaii was its own kingdom, its own republic, its own country. It had a king, it had a queen. They had their own people, and quite honestly, they got along really well with America. Us in Hawaii, we got along really great when Hawaii used to be its own kingdom. In fact, some Americans would go over to Hawaii. These Americans were missionaries. These missionaries went to Hawaii to spread the religion of Christianity. But a lot of the missionaries started to become farmers because they figured out that Hawaii had really, really good soil. You could grow lots of wonderful fruits and especially sugar in Hawaii. And so that's what they started to do. These missionaries became sugar farmers, and they started making money, doing really, really well, making a lot of money, trading a lot of sugar with the United States, right? And some of these U.S. People actually became Hawaiian citizens. These missionaries became Hawaiian citizens under the Queen of Hawaii and became very, very wealthy. Now, the Queen of Hawaii, her name, actually, we'll get there. Her name was Liliuokalani. I'll show you a picture of her in a little bit. But she had an idea, and her idea was this. She's like, you know what? We have these people who are making a ton of money being farmers in Hawaii, making bank. I want to tax them a little bit. I'm going to tax these farmers a little bit so that money can go back to the Hawaiian government and we can, invest it into schools or roads or whatever we need. Well, the farmers didn't like that. These white farmers, these former American farmers, and they were white, and they were wealthy. They didn't like that. They didn't want to have to pay these taxes. So they kind of got this group together, and they called themselves the Committee of Safety. And they had this one guy as their leader. His name was Sanford Dole. And here's a picture of Sanford Dole. He eventually will become the president of Hawaii. But he is like the leader of this group of white people, these white farmers, and they don't want to pay these taxes. So what he's going to do is this group of people, they're going to get their, and by the way, have you seen this guy before? Ever heard of Sanford Dole? Anyone know Sanford Dole? No? Okay, that's all right. We'll come back to him. But anyway, they get in charge of they get in charge and they make this group, these wealthy farmers make this group. And they get all these people on their side. They hire these mercenaries, these soldiers. And they get like 1,400 people. And that may not seem like a lot, but it's more than the Hawaiian government had. The Hawaiian government, Queen Liliuokalani, she did not have an army. And that's Queen right there, right? She didn't have an army. The police force wasn't really loyal to her. So these people, these white farmers, they got 1,400 soldiers together and they could control the island. And more or less they got together one day and they said, you know what? We are deposing the queen. And they sent the soldiers over to the palace, right? And here's the palace over here. And here's the soldiers. And they surrounded the palace and they put Queen Liliuokalani under house arrest, meaning that she was arrested, she was in the palace, she wasn't allowed to leave. And then they called the US military. And the US military got involved, and they also surrounded the palace, and they were there and keeping the queen in there, and it's the US Marines. And the US Marines did this because, again, the Sanford Dole and the white farmers, they used to be Americans, and they were rich, and they had a lot of sway with the American government. So that's more or less what happened. We surround the queen, and we force her to abdicate. The white farmers and the American army forces the queen to abdicate because she refuses to have any fights. She thinks that if she fights with the U.S., it could actually destroy Hawaii, that the U.S. could just come in, take over everything, destroy everything, which, is probably true. We had a much stronger army than they did. So she abdicates, and now Sanford Dole, the guy I showed you before, is now elected as the president of Hawaii. And he becomes the president of the Republic of Hawaii from 1894 to 1900. And if you haven't heard of Sanford Dole, maybe you just saw it. He is the founder of Dole Pineapple, the whole Dole Fruit Company, Dole bananas, Dole pineapples, what have you, whatever you see him at the store. That's that guy. So that's actually how a fruit company helped take over Hawaii. Dole, the fruit company, every time you go to Disneyland, you get a Dole Whip, you go to the store, you get like Dole Pineapple, whatever. You were supporting a company that helped overthrow the Kingdom of Hawaii and made them become part of the United States. So that does happen a little bit later. Eventually, they do become a state of the United States. They're not just their own republic anymore. And we take them over. We annex them. Annex means you take a country and make it part of your own. So that's how America and Dole took over the government of Hawaii. We're going to watch a video on that in just a second. But before we do, I want to teach you a quick, interesting fact about the country of Hawaii, or I guess the state of Hawaii now. I like to do this at least once a lesson, trying to give you something interesting. Remember, in the last one, I think we talked about how George Washington wasn't the first president of the United States. It's John Hanson. But now, I want to teach you the state fish of Hawaii. Now, what is the state fish of Hawaii? It is the reef triggerfish. And you might be like, Mr. G, that's not interesting. And you're right, it's not. But in Hawaiian, the reef triggerfish has a pretty interesting and cool name. It is called the Huma Huma Nuku Nuku Apua'a. And I'm going to teach you how to say it today because it's fun to say things in Hawaiian, and it'll just be our thing for the day, fun fact for the day. So here's how to say the state fish of Hawaii, the Huma Huma Nuku Nuku Apua'a. First, you start with the word humu. So just say humu. No, say it. You actually say it out loud. Okay, I have no idea if you said it or not, but I'm going to assume you said humu. Good job. Now say it twice. Humu, humu. I can't hear you. I know I don't. I have no idea if you're saying, but humu, humu. Humu, humu. Your turn. Humu, humu. All right. So I think you got humu, humu. All right. The next part is the word nuku. Nuku. Your turn. Nuku. Nuku. Fantastic work. All right. So now you just say it twice. Nuku, nuku. Good job. All right, let's try the whole thing. Humu, humu, nuku, nuku. Fantastic. All right, you're almost there. The last part is apua'a. So apua'a, apua'a. Your turn. Apua'a. All right, close enough. So humu, humu, nuku, nuku, apua'a. Humu, humu, nuku, nuku, wapua'a. And it's just a fun thing to say. I don't know. Sometimes I just like to teach fun things to say. So, like even the queen's name, Liliuokalani, that's a fun thing to say. All right. So anyway, that's the humu, humu, nuku, nuku, wapua'a. There you go. What are we doing? There's something else I want to talk about. Okay. So the last thing we're going to do today is we're going to watch this video. This video is really interesting. It talks about Native Hawaiians today. And it's going to talk about how some of these Hawaiians feel about America. Now that we know the history, the Hawaiians know their history too. They know that they used to have their own country. They know that they were taken over by the U.S. military. And you know what? Some of them are kind of pissed about it. And so we're going to watch this video to see how they feel about Hawaii, how they feel about Hawaii as part of America, and whether they want to still be part of America. So you'll watch that. You'll answer the questions on that. And that will be our lesson for today. All right, so that's what we got for you. Hopefully you took your notes, you got your guided notes done. Hopefully you already did your Quizlet vocab. You'll watch this video now, right? This video, it's right here, Fighting for Freedom. You'll answer these questions, and then you'll take the quiz. The quiz is the last part. All right, that's all I got for you today. We have 30 minutes recorded. It'll take you at least 30. So that's a good amount of work. It's not impossible, though. All right. So again, if you have any questions, show up in the Zoom for your time period. I'll have the Zoom open tomorrow. Probably won't need to go in there, but it's there if you want it. Or honestly, just email me. That probably works even better. Okay. Hopefully you learned something interesting. I hope you did. At least you know what a hum hum nuku nuku is now. All right. I'll see you guys later. Have a great, wonderful day.